Before we get going, I'd just like to check that there's nobody here who's here for actual tips on dragon slaying. I realise the title could be a bit misleading, so if you've got you here on false pretenses, now's probably the time to leave. That's good. You're still here. Fantastic. So, my name's Chris, and I'm the DBA/database designer for a company called Move With Us. And this is my colleague, also called Chris. We like to keep it easy for you. And he's the build manager at Move With Us. Move With Us is a property services company over in, near Cambridge. And we employ 350 people at our head office. We've got an internal development team of about 11 guys. And they design our internal systems and also the systems for our solicitors, agents, and property developers. This gives us a potential user base of about 20,000 users. We're here today to tell you about our ongoing quest to control our legacy database and to simplify our deployment process. So let's look at the areas that we're going to cover. Now, lots of this will be familiar to those people who've inherited systems some years back. Back in the days when the database tools that were available to us were quite limited, and to be quite honest, the concept of source controlling that was a mere pipe dream. Our legacy system, it was designed by one man. He designed the database code and the application code. He did it all. It was perfect for us back in 2003. As time goes by, all being well, your business grows, it's successful. That leads to changing requirements, extra features, functions, capabilities, which in turn leads to extra database loads and, of course, extra development and support staff to maintain that. So what we want simple, easy, and quick changes to make soon become really quite complex. And the whole deployment process is becoming a bit of a specialist job, to be honest. Allied to that, the slightest database changes now have the potential to unleash all hell. This is our legacy dragon. So let's have a look what it looked like. Pretty scary, huh? Well, the fella on the left anyway. The bit on the right, that's our content management system. I don't think you could say that's scary. Maybe a touch bland, but certainly not scary. Now, our content management system was designed using SQL tables, and that would hold VB scripts, JavaScript, XML, and classic ASP. These database fields would often hold thousands of lines of code, which is all interconnected in order to run our web systems. Good thing about that, if we want to make changes, we can make them quickly and instantly. Bad thing is we're at risk of losing control of our code. One badly inserted line of code could, and often did, lead to system downtime. It's never good. Allied to that, we were never sure where the problem originated due to the interconnected nature of our CMS. So let's have a look at some of the issues that we faced. I think as I alluded to earlier, our code changes were originally made on live. We had this one developer who knew the system inside and out. For him, it was fairly quick and risk-free to make changes. He very rarely broke code. If he did break code, he knew it so well. He could either quickly apply a fix before the user base noticed, or he could roll that back, because again, he knew the code so well. As your business grows, you get more developers. They don't have the same knowledge of that code base. They're less familiar with the code. Often when they break code, it's a lot more catastrophic. They're not sure how to sort it out, and the amount of downtime that it leads to is generally a lot longer and a lot more painful. Also, with these extra developers that we've got on board, the one guy who knew all of the code, suddenly he doesn't know all of it. He knows most of it, but all of the extra code he's developing, he's no longer got absolute knowledge of that code. So we're at risk. We realised we really couldn't carry on like this. So this is the first stab of what we came up with. We created a development environment. Initially, we went for a shared database solution, which worked for us quite well. We also introduced a QA environment and a UAT environment. What this did give us was the ability to transfer code from these systems so they could exist with different code in them, and these systems were disparate, which is all good. We worked like this for about 6 months, fairly happily, and we soon realized that this was causing us a major problem. With multiple devs working on one integration database, they were often working on the same items of code. So what would happen is they'd both be working on the same item, and they'd be overwriting each other's code without having a clue what they're doing. What this leads to is whoever saves last wins, basically. So what we had to do is we had to tweak our structure slightly so that each developer had their own copy of the database. So that's what we've got here. This got us over the problem of overwriting the code, but unfortunately it did raise another issue. We've now got multiple environments, and we need to find a way of getting representative test data and development data into those environments. We looked at SQL Data Generator, which is something that Redgate provided. Unfortunately, our original database design didn't have foreign keys, and it was quite a complex schema. So unfortunately, SQL Data Generator really couldn't help us with automatically populating that data. So what we came up with was taking a backup of our live system and restoring back to these environments, obviously after we'd masked any sensitive data. This did cause us some space issues. Our live data was about 100 gig. We now had 7 developers, 3 extra environments. That's 1 terabyte of data. We were struggling with that. As Grant alluded to earlier in his presentation, Redgate have got a tool at the moment which should be able to help out with cloning databases. So I would say, if you're having the same issues as us, maybe have a chat with those guys, see what they can do for you. So this is all excellent news. Now our developers, as you can see, are working really detached from live, which is a million miles from where we were when we started. But this did cause us issues in the fact that we needed to keep track of this data. And we also needed to ensure that each developer was working with the latest head of code. Which leads me nicely on to source control. Now, our application developer brethren have been using a product called SVN for years, quite happily. They knew exactly who'd made what change, and they could easily get the latest set of code. If only my database team could have something similar. Well, luckily for me, Redgate had come up with a little tool called SQL Source Control, which I'm sure you've heard lots about today. That meant that us database guys could finally join the SVN party. What you can see up here is a couple of screen prints of SQL Source Control. And what it meant is that the developers, now they had their own local DBs, could make changes on those and commit their code up using source control and adding comments in there. It also meant if they went to the Get Latest tab, they could get the latest information. Better than that, they could even go through View History and check the history of each of these objects, which meant they had total visibility of what had happened to the objects in the database. This did leave us with one more rather large obstacle to get over, and that was our very manual deployment process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass you on to Build Manager Chris, who's going to explain the rest. Thank you. Cheers, Chris.
Thank you. Okay, so let's recap a little bit. When I joined the company in 2009, I'm working on live. Working as a developer at this stage. I'm not a build manager at this stage, I'm a developer. There's no control, there's no safety nets, there's no nothing. And what that meant was that developers were terrified of writing code, because every time they wrote code, it could break. And what that meant was that the business didn't trust us, and morale sucked. This isn't a good place to be. So we moved on, and in 2010 we get out of that, we're on that shared database solution we saw. But we still got no control. Developers aren't scared to write code anymore, but they're terrified of the day they're told to take it to live. And releases were taking hours, sometimes days, with extremely high visibility. Embarrassment was our normal state during release, and the business didn't trust us, and morale sucked. And at this stage, I've been in the company for a year and a half, and I had seen so many other developers come and go, because most of them didn't want to work like this and didn't want to be there. So the turnover was really high, and that was causing that spiral to be even worse, because you lost whatever experience they gained, and you went back to square one again. So we finally got to the individual databases, and we've got some measure of control. But the control we've got presents a different set of problems. Your developers are quite happy coding their code. They're not scared of live. They're completely fed up with their build manager, which by this point is me, because I keep coming and asking them awkward questions about the build they did 6 months ago, which they can no longer remember the answers to. So we introduced source control. And at this stage, I finally get some things I've never had before, like Chris has just alluded to. You've got accountability. Who made this change? Look at the history. I've got traceability. What was it you were trying to do? What is the entirety of your build? What's the connections? What were you trying to do? Okay, it's great. And with the Redgate tools of SQL Compare and SQL Data Compare, I'm already at the stage where I can now generate deployment scripts and rollback scripts. Now, this is something I've never had before, the ability to put something in live, watch it break, and go, oops, well, let's get that back out again, and work out what on earth went wrong. But you've still got some problems here, and some of those problems are to do with how long it takes to deploy, and some of those problems are to do with the fact that these builds were overtaking each other. And that meant that although we've got some measure of control, it's not enough. However, trust has started to re-emerge with business because most of our builds actually work. Morale starts to go up, and I can actually say to my boss, I've got control, I can see this code, I can see what's going on. So we're done, right? What more could I want? Well, as Chris has alluded to, it's a very manual process, particularly with the legacy stuff. On the screen, what you've got there now is an extract from one of our legacy code bases. And I will be manually verifying that deploy to make sure that the developer meant to release it. Because although I could see the traceability that he committed to that code, I couldn't tell without reviewing that code, probably with him, whether he meant all of it. Because these are shared artifacts, and they might be being built and used for more than one page in our system, which is really hard to keep track of. And what that means is that there is a huge reliance on the skills, not only of the predictable deployment skills of understanding how to use the SQL tools from Redgate, understanding how to use SVN, but also being able to read the code. Now, build managers shouldn't have to be able to read code, but I had to. And more often than not, I would find at least one thing in every build that I needed to at least question. And what that meant at this stage is what it started out being a little part of my job role as the team lead for that section became my job title. Okay, I can live with that. But at this stage, we started trying to migrate off this platform. I think you can see the reasons why. And what that brought to the table was we were going to start coding in .NET. We were going to have .NET projects. Projects equals project managers. Project managers turn up with all sorts of strange things. They have specifications, deadlines. They have expectations. And at this stage, I'm struggling to meet any of those. And what happened next was I found myself moving code all the time in little tiny pieces, making my own scripts, moving it from here to here to here to there, back again, rolling it back manually, pushing it forward again. And what my job title became, it overtook my entire life. I found myself doing out-of-hours releases to test because the development team couldn't even afford the downtime I was finding there because the releases were still taking too long. I got to the stage where there were that many artifacts of code moving around through this process that I even resorted to keeping track of it in an Excel spreadsheet. And in short, my sanity started to slip. And here's the thing. when your build manager is that stressed, all the old dragons you got rid of come back again. Because you start ending up with badly defined builds, and because they're badly defined, they start escaping through the environments, possibly even into production, broken. And all of a sudden the business trust starts to wane again. They haven't forgotten the bad old days, it wasn't that long ago. Trust started to disappear again. And so we needed some help. And we got it from Redgate. They provided enlightenment. They told me about continuous integration. And I said, oh, hang on, I know about that. That's for applications. But they said, no, you're in SVN, so you can have it too. And they showed me this. Now, you've seen this loads today. And when we set up this presentation, I didn't realize how often you were going to be seeing screens like this. But I'm going to talk you through it anyway for the benefit of anybody who's still on our journey. What you've got on the screen there is an extract from our tSQLt. This is a real extract. This is one of the projects we've got on the go at the moment. It's a relatively complicated build in that it's got 2 sites in there, third one down fencing site, bottom one workflow service, and it's got 3 separate databases that it's dependent on. Top one, database, fourth one down, tasks, fifth one down, workflow persistence. Now, if you've used tSQLt, it'll be no surprise to know that green means good, red means bad. Sorry. Okay. And some of the things that you can do with tSQLt that have been mentioned, but I'll mention again, we've got this set up so that if it breaks, it emails everyone. It emails the whole team. And whoever owns up to being responsible for that ends up doing the T's for the rest of the day. If it's all green, you start getting into the next bit, which is the really clever bit that really started to help us, which is if everything has been successfully built and everything is green and nothing is outstanding, that second one down, deploy, kicks in. And what that one is doing is it's going, hang on a minute, everything's ready, everything's good, and it's new, I'm going to build it for you. And it moves it through to deployment manager into your integration environment. And that gets you to here. Now, this is Redgate's deployment manager. Most of you in the room probably are aware that this has just been retired. And we are migrating onto Octopus ourselves at the moment. But I don't have the maturity of deployments in Octopus to show you. So I'm still showing you a screenshot from Redgate. The principles are still the same. And what you can see in here is I've got 4 environments set up in Deployment Manager, same as you can do in Octopus. I've got integration test and 2 different cuts of UAT. I've got a lot of external clients who have to jump through extra hoops of security. So I have a separate environment for them. And we've got 5 projects. Now the one we had on the last screen was panel management, which is the 4th one down. And I hope you can see the numbers there to see that there are 4 different versions and 4 different environments in there. And this is some of the power of what tSQLt Deployment Manager gave me. And if you're still on this journey, they can give to you as well. Which is I've got 4 different cuts there. I've got the integration cut, which was whichever developer pressed commit last. And then I've got 3 cuts that have been advanced forward from previous successful deployments because they are wanted to be tested, UAT, and in one case there I've got a very specific cut there that somebody wanted to spend a lot of time testing through one particular area of functionality. They didn't want their data to move. I've left it there for them. I can leave it there as long as I need to. Now, there's quite a lot of other things I want to tell you about on here because between those 2 screens, what you have seen is successful automatic deployment of our application and database code synchronized. They arrived on their own. So what that means is you never get that gap again between the schema and the application, where the application is trying to talk to something in the schema that hasn't arrived yet, or vice versa. You also never get that drop-down box that doesn't have the values in that they're now dependent on, because you source control that, and it travels with everything else. Source control that content, and off it goes. Also on here, though, I've got those 4 environments on there, and that means I've got 4 different database servers. So how does the code know that? Well, there's this helpful thing that the developers can do for us called web config transformations. Now, if you're not familiar with these, this saves me lots of time. You set it up once, and I often do it myself. set it at once to change all the values that you want to be different in that environment. And the most important one for this room is the database connection string, or strings, depending on your complexity. And what that means is, because the name of my environment matches the name of the transform file, when it builds, it detects that it's got the same name, it uses that transformation, it changes those values to what I told it to, it arrives ready to rock and roll. Right? So I don't have to go in there anymore and check the connection strings. I like that. So here's the situation that I've got now. My developers are cracking on and they're writing their code. They're committing all day long. There's a team of them, so they need to commit all day long because they also need to get latest from each other. Every time they commit, it builds. Every time it builds, it tells them straight away if their build is broken, and they deal with it. If it's successful, it says so and sits there. I don't have to do any work. Okay? The development team leader decides that that build is fit for test. It includes a body of work that they want to see tested. He opens a wizard on which you have to click about 3 buttons and off it goes to test. I don't have to do any work. The test team tests that through. If they're not happy with it, they raise extra cases that go on the backlog. If they are happy with it, they may want to give it to the project manager so that he can go and manage the UAT. So the test team leader opens that wizard, presses some buttons, and deploys it to UAT. I don't do any work. I like this. I like this a lot, because this lets me focus on the things that aren't in here yet. There's 5 projects on there. We've got 7 on the go at the moment, and a backlog of 30-odd others that I want to get in here for when they need work. Now, one of the things that that doesn't do is it doesn't prove that the build had worth. The build has been deployed. It didn't break. Great. The logic might be shredded, but the build worked. What if it tested itself? Well, we've heard a lot about this today, but nonetheless, this is our real example. This is a different project of ours called AMA. And it's a much simpler build in one sense, in that it only has one site, one database to worry about, and the all-important deploy package. However, there are 618 key differences on that slide, because next to that site it says tests past 618. Now in this case, those are tests that are primarily set up in Selenium by the development team using .NET Studio. But they could be just as easily be tSQLt tests, and we've got other ones that are set up. You can't tell the difference when you're looking at it here anyway. But what that does do is it makes those tests a part of that build and part of that deployment or integration. If any of those tests fail, the build stops. It goes red, it sends that email, everybody knows what the problem is, everybody gets on and deals with it. And that's great for me, because not only are they now testing the validity of the build, but they're also starting to test the validity of the functionality straight away. Okay, so this is where we are now. We know we're not done. This isn't an end to a story. We're still in the story, same as you all are. And we've still got some more slaying to be done. And we've got 4 points there I want to talk about. The first one is more tSQLt tests. Now, by that, what we're focused on now is developers don't think like DBAs. You may have noticed this. They're all about functionality. They tend to think about performance when you tell them to. DBAs should be looking at performance fairly early on. So that means that you can look at tSQLt tests that look at performance, that look at integrity of the data, things that developers sometimes overlook the importance of. We want to front load the testing. By that, what we mean is we want to change our estimating model so that when we estimate a piece of work, we estimate it including the cost of writing the test to cover it, whether that be in Selenium or tSQLt. Now, we think we've already proven the model for that, because we had to run one project through where we had 3 weeks and 3 days, and that was it. Government set deadline, we couldn't wriggle. We had to deliver. And by using these methodologies, we delivered 3 weeks and 3 days. It wasn't a particularly big or complex project, as you might imagine, with that sort of deadline, but we did do it, and we did it because of all the groundwork we'd done on these bigger projects. We could just take this, repeat it, and do it. In that particular project, we were looking at upwards of 20 deploys a day into integration. But it wasn't a problem because it does it automatically. It doesn't matter how many builds there are. We were looking at, on some days, between 5 and 10 deployments to test a day. Again, not a problem. It's a 3-click wizard and done. And that mobility was really important. And that allows us to demonstrate that if we put the testing in first, you get less iterations through formal testing because you've already covered off all the basics. We are looking to do that more. And that brings me neatly on to the last one on the bottom one there. Iterate more often. If you've built in to your methodology more Selenium tests, more tSQLt tests, and you're building, you front-loaded all the testing, so those are not additional costs, then you can iterate a lot. Build it all the time. Build it loads. Build it unnecessarily. Because all the time you're doing that, you are proving that you don't need to go and repeat those tests, which means your test team can focus on what's new. What's been coded today, I'm going to test that. Have I verified that there are enough tests there that I don't need to go and look at that again? Maybe they're not happy. Maybe they ask for some more tests. Now, I skipped over one. It's at the top of the list, and we always put it at the top of the list. Live deploys. Continuous deployment, continuous delivery. We believe that we can, very easily from where we stand now, go on to continuous delivery with an eye towards some form of continuous deployment. But we've got legwork to do because we have never had a staging environment, and you've got to have one of those if you're going to go there. And that's going to cost money, and I have to justify that to my boss. But we believe we can, for some of the reasons that Grant mentioned in his last talk as well, which is that we can leverage that staging environment for more than one purpose. Nonetheless, we now believe that we have tamed our dragon. So my question to you is, what about yours?